Welcome to True Crime Her Story. Thanks for being with us. Stay tuned for the full story behind the headlines, a story that matters. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video to help keep her memory alive.
I don't want to hurt you, bro. I do not want to shoot you. Put it down. You don't want to end it this way. You don't want to end it this way, brother. I promise you. Whatever happened today, it can be fixed. Don't pull the trigger. Put it down. Adeem, put it down, buddy. Don't do it, man. Put it down. All the way up in the air. Keep walking toward me. If you do is I'm gonna have you lay down in the grass. 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 Watch. Lay all the way down. My gun is going in its holster. Somebody's got cover. All right. Hey, I was all the way down. Have we exfilled from that house? How old are you, bro? 14? Who did you shoot?
Cancel aviation. Aviation on channel 1066.
Who'd you shoot?
As before, we got bait 1066.
Look at me in my eyeballs. I don't have a clue what just happened in there. We're gonna find out, right? You made whatever choices you made. That's the best choice you made all day long. Thank you.
September 16th, 2023, Riverview, Florida. The clock read a little after 4 p.m. when the quiet hum of a Saturday afternoon was broken by panic. Neighbors were calling 911. A boy was seen running through the Summerfield subdivision, a handgun in his hands. At times, he lifted it to his own head. At other moments, he waved it in the open air, the weight of his choices hanging in every second. Deputies rushed to the scene. Their body cameras captured the chilling standoff. A teenager, just 14 years old, stood in the middle of the street with the barrel of a gun pressed against his temple. The voices of trained officers cut through the air. "Don't do it. Put it down, buddy. Walk toward me. It doesn't have to end this way." For 16 minutes, they pleaded. Every heartbeat, every pause carried the possibility that a life could end right there on the pavement. But what no one watching through their windows could fully grasp in that moment was that the damage had already been done. Only minutes before, inside a home on Linmore Drive, a life had been taken. Tiffany Harris, a 39-year-old mother of 3, was shot to death. The alleged shooter was not a stranger, not an intruder, it was her own son. As the officers worked to save one young life, another had already been lost. And the question that continues to haunt a community, a family, and investigators is this: how does a child with no criminal history, no record of violence, end up accused of murdering his own mother? What you're about to hear is heartbreaking. Make sure this story reaches beyond this screen. Hit like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe. Tiffany Lunda Harris was 39 years old, and for most of her life she carried the weight of 2 identities with equal force: caregiver and protector. In Riverview, Florida, she worked at a convalescent center, the kind of job that demanded patience and strength. Day after day, she cared for elderly patients who couldn't care for themselves, lifting bodies, calming fears, and giving dignity where it was too often stripped away. But her most important work always began once she clocked out. At home, she was a mother of 3. Her oldest, Lendra, who was expecting her first child, her son Devin, finding his footing in adolescence, and her youngest, Adeem, just 14. Each child carried a different piece of her heart, and those who knew her say she lived for them. Tiffany's own mother described her as a light, someone who didn't have much, but with what she had, she did a lot. She gave without hesitation, sometimes stretching herself thin, but always showing up. Friends remembered how she opened her doors to neighborhood kids who had nowhere to go, offering food when she had little left, making sure no child near her would feel forgotten. In a Facebook post just weeks before her death, she wrote words that today feel haunting. "I want my children to always know if the relationship ain't working, come home. If the bills become overwhelming, come home. If you feel unsafe, come home. If something don't feel right, come home." It was more than a post, it was a promise, the voice of a mother trying to carve out a safe place in a world that so often isn't safe for young Black children. For Tiffany, family was everything. She fought to shield her kids from favoritism, from disappointment, from feeling like outsiders. "My kid will never feel left out," she once said, making clear that no matter what the world threw at her, she would protect her children fiercely. She was on the verge of a new chapter too, soon to become a grandmother, waiting to hold her daughter's baby in her arms. There was joy in that, and a kind of hope that her family would continue to grow stronger. Those closest to her believed that no matter the struggle, Tiffany's strength was endless. She kept faith close, often writing prayers online, asking God to heal my household, and to give her the endurance to keep pushing forward. Yet for all her resilience, she was tired. Tired of being taken advantage of. Tired of feeling that people loved her only for what she gave and not for who she was. In those words, you hear both her exhaustion and her determination to never let her children go without. Tiffany Harris lived a life of giving, of holding others up when they fell short, and she asked for very little in return. But in September of 2023, the promise she held on to most, to always keep her children safe, was shattered inside her own home. Inside Tiffany Harris's home on Linmore Drive, life was never simple, but it was filled with the kind of moments only a close family could share. Her oldest daughter, Lindra, was preparing for motherhood herself. Carrying the child Tiffany was eager to meet and hold. The idea of becoming a grandmother brought her a sense of joy and pride, a reminder that the sacrifices she made every day had been worth it. Her son Devin, a teenager trying to find his way through the challenges of growing up, was still at home, relying on her stability and her guidance. And then there was Adeem, just 14 years old, her youngest, the child who still needed her the most. He was quiet, not known to cause trouble in school, and by all accounts had no history of violence. Tiffany's focus was divided, stretched thin between her children's needs, her job, and her own dreams of finally finding companionship after years of carrying the burden of single motherhood. It was around this time that she began dating Cortevious Cruz, known in Riverview's music circles as AQL. He was a local rapper, someone who had been on small stages, performing in front of local crowds and trying to carve out his own path. To Tiffany, he represented something new, companionship after years of shouldering life alone. Their relationship was fresh, only a month old, still in the stage where everything feels like possibility. Cruz later described Tiffany as loving and selfless, a mother who put her kids first, even while trying to build a life with someone new. But for her children, the adjustment wasn't as simple. A new man in the home, sitting in the living room, watching TV with them, represented change. And change was never easy in a household already carrying stress. Tiffany had always tried to balance everything. Long shifts at the convalescent center, bills that seemed endless, the demands of raising 3 children. And now she was also learning to weave a new relationship into that rhythm. It wasn't just about her happiness anymore. It was about whether her children could accept someone new in their space, their routines, their lives. For Tiffany, the struggle was invisible to outsiders. On social media, she kept her faith strong, asking God to protect her family and give her the strength to keep going. At home, she pushed through exhaustion, determined to hold her children together while stepping cautiously into the possibility of love. Single motherhood had always required her to be more than one person at once: provider, protector, counselor, and now partner. She carried those roles with determination, even when they pulled her in different directions. Cortevious tried to connect, spending time in the home, sharing small moments with Adeem and Devin, while Tiffany focused on guiding her pregnant daughter through the changes ahead. But behind every introduction, every conversation, there was the quiet weight of adjustment. Children navigating life with a new figure in their home, a mother balancing the promise of companionship with the responsibility of keeping her family steady. It was a fragile balance, one Tiffany was working hard to maintain. But on September 16, 2023, the balance broke in ways no one could have imagined. September 16, 2023, began like any other late summer Saturday in Riverview, Florida. The sun was high, the air heavy with humidity, and the neighborhood of Summerfield was alive with the normal sounds of the weekend. Lawns being mowed, children riding their bikes, families settling into their routines. Inside Tiffany Harris's home on Linmore Drive, the atmosphere was calm, ordinary in every sense. Tiffany was off work that day, a chance to be at home with her children, a rare pause from her long shifts at the convalescent center. In the living room, her new boyfriend, Cortevius Cruz, sat on the couch with Tiffany's youngest son, Adim. They were watching television, the kind of quiet activity that fills an afternoon when no one expects anything out of the ordinary. According to Cruz, there was no warning, no argument, no sound that broke the silence. Just a sudden change. He said the 14-year-old shifted in his seat and began staring off, eyes fixed but vacant, like he was looking through him and not at him. When Cruz asked if he was okay, there was no answer. Adim simply rose to his feet and walked out of the room. Cruz stayed on the couch, unsure of what the boy was thinking, unsure of what would happen next. The house remained quiet, Tiffany somewhere in another room, Devin nearby, and life carrying forward without any sign that disaster was seconds away. Then, without warning, Adim returned. This time, he wasn't empty-handed. In his grasp was a gun, and before Cruz could fully register what he was seeing, shots rang out. The first bullet tore into his hand. The second struck his other hand. More followed, his shoulder, his jaw, his leg. 5 bullets in total. Cruz later told reporters that the attack was immediate and relentless. No chance to react, no time to shield himself beyond instinctively raising his hands. The pain was searing, the shock instant, but somehow he remained conscious. The sound of gunfire echoed through the house, and Tiffany Harris heard it. A mother's instinct doesn't hesitate. She ran toward the noise and found her boyfriend bleeding, struggling to move, and her 14-year-old son holding the weapon that had just torn through another human being. In that instant, Tiffany did what mothers do. She acted. She lunged at her son, wrestling him, fighting to take the gun from his hands. She had spent years lifting patients, holding families together, carrying burdens that would break others. But this was different. This was her child, and he still had the weapon. As they struggled, Adim fired again. The shot struck Tiffany. She fell, her life taken in the very home she fought to keep safe for her children. Her son Devin, witnessing the chaos, saw his mother fall. He saw his younger brother with the weapon and realized he was next. When Adim pointed the gun toward him, he made a decision that would stay with him forever. He ran. He escaped the house, carrying with him the memory of what he had just seen and the knowledge that his family had been shattered in a matter of seconds. Inside, Cortevius Cruz, despite his injuries, fought to move. He dragged himself from the couch, blood pouring from his wounds, stumbling toward the door. Each step left a trail through the house and out onto the street, his only chance for survival. Neighbors would soon see him collapse in the driveway, his body battered, but somehow still alive. What unfolded in those moments was as clear as it was devastating. A 39-year-old mother lay dead, her boyfriend critically wounded but clinging to life. And her son, the boy she once vowed would always have a home to return to, was armed and moving through the neighborhood. Within minutes, one mother was dead, one man was bleeding in the street, and a 14-year-old was running through the neighborhood with a gun. Shortly after 4 p.m. on September 16, 2023, the peace of the Summerfield subdivision broke apart with a wave of panic. Calls began pouring into the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. One caller reported multiple gunshots on Linmore Drive, their voice shaken as they described a boy running through the neighborhood with a firearm. Another neighbor said he was pointing the weapon at his own head, walking up and down the street as if he no longer cared what happened next. From windows and doorways, residents who just moments earlier had been trimming hedges or watching children play suddenly froze in disbelief. A quiet stretch of Florida suburbia was transformed in seconds into a scene people compared to a war zone. Parents pulled their children inside, doors slammed shut, blinds snapped closed, yet everyone kept watching. They couldn't turn away from the sight of a teenager, someone they had seen walking these streets before, now holding a gun and threatening to end his life. To the dispatchers, the urgency was clear. Multiple reports came within minutes, all describing the same image. A young male, only a boy, carrying a gun in the open, at times lifting it to his own head, at times lowering it, pacing under the heavy afternoon sun. The first deputies arriving on Linmore Drive saw what neighbors had already been describing. A 14-year-old, shirt damp with sweat, clutching a handgun, the weight of his decisions trailing him with every step. In those early moments, no one knew if more shots would ring out, if more lives were at risk, or if the boy would turn the weapon on himself before law enforcement could intervene. What had been an ordinary weekend afternoon just blocks from schools and playgrounds was suddenly the center of an unfolding crisis. The neighborhood that once felt safe had been thrust into the heart of a tragedy that no one living there would ever forget. Deputies moved in quickly, their body cameras recording every second of what would become a tense and delicate standoff. On Linmore Drive, they found a boy, just 14 years old, pacing in the open with a handgun pressed against his own head. Neighbors looked on in disbelief from behind locked doors as trained officers began speaking to him, voices steady, words chosen carefully. They called him by name, they told him they didn't want to hurt him, they begged him to keep walking toward them. For 16 minutes, the exchange continued, each moment holding the possibility that the boy might pull the trigger. Again and again he lifted the gun to his temple, his finger hovering near the trigger, and each time deputies urged him to stop. "It can be fixed," one officer said. "Don't pull the trigger. Put it down, buddy." The words were calm, measured, repeated with a determination to break through the chaos inside a teenager's mind. The deputies kept their distance but refused to give up. They did not shout, they did not escalate, they built trust step by step, reminding him that he was still alive, that there was still another choice to make. Sheriff Chad Chronister would later describe their actions as textbook de-escalation, a model for how officers should respond in the most difficult of circumstances. He pointed out how they held their composure, never rushing, never letting panic overtake them, even as the young boy raised the gun to his head at least half a dozen times. At any second, it could have ended in tragedy. But the deputies stayed the course. Finally, when the opportunity came, a less lethal round was fired, striking the teen and forcing him to drop the weapon. In that instant, deputies rushed forward, securing him safely without another shot being fired. The weapon was recovered, and the boy was taken into custody. Relief washed over the officers, the neighbors, the dispatchers listening on the other end of the calls. The standoff had ended without another life lost. But for Tiffany Harris, it was already too late. Cortevius Cruz was rushed to Tampa General Hospital with 5 gunshot wounds. His hands were mangled, his jaw wired shut, his shoulder and leg pierced by bullets that should have taken his life. For days he lay in critical condition, drifting in and out of consciousness, doctors uncertain if he would survive. When he finally opened his eyes and began to speak, his words were filled with both pain and sorrow. He told reporters that Tiffany Harris had been a loving, selfless mother, the kind of woman who gave more than she ever kept for herself, and he carried the heavy belief that she died trying to save him. He showed the scars across his body as living proof of what had unfolded inside that home. But the deeper wounds were emotional, nightmares, flashbacks, and the knowledge that the woman he had only begun to know was gone forever. Tiffany's mother, Teresa, faced the unimaginable task of burying her daughter. At vigils and in interviews, she spoke through tears, remembering Tiffany as a light, someone who had very little but always gave everything she had. She clung to her faith, but also raised hard questions. She called on families everywhere to keep their firearms secured, to make sure that no other child could pick up a gun as easily as her grandson had. Her words were not about politics, but about protection, about sparing another mother the agony she now carried. For Tiffany's oldest daughter, Lendra, the loss carried another weight. She was expecting her first child, preparing to make Tiffany a grandmother, but the baby would be born into a world without the grandmother who had been so eager to welcome them. Tiffany had spoken often about family being her anchor, and the cruelest part of her death was that she would never hold the grandchild who might have given her the joy she had been waiting for. Devin, Tiffany's middle child, carried his trauma silently. He had witnessed his mother fighting for her life, had seen his brother point a gun in his direction, and had run for survival. Reports mention his presence, but unlike others, he has not spoken publicly. Some pain is too deep to put into words, and for Devin, the weight of that day remains locked inside. Beyond the family, the community was shaken. Neighbors who had once waved at Tiffany as she came home from work struggled to reconcile the tragedy with the woman they knew. Her co-workers at the convalescent center remembered her dedication, her ability to comfort the sick and the elderly with patience and grace. Churches and friends spoke of her faith, her willingness to help others, her laughter in the face of hardship. In Riverview, the shock lingered, spreading from one household to another, each person reckoning with the reality that a mother had been lost, her children left fractured, and an entire neighborhood forever changed. The investigation began immediately after the standoff ended, deputies securing the home on Linmore Drive, while detectives worked to piece together what had led to such devastation. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office quickly confirmed the loss of Tiffany Harris and the near-fatal injuries to her boyfriend, Cortevius Cruz. Within days, prosecutors announced the charges against Tiffany's youngest son, 14-year-old Adeem Berry. He was formally charged with second-degree murder for the killing of his mother, attempted first-degree premeditated murder for shooting Cruz multiple times, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon for pointing the gun at his older brother. The decision to prosecute him as an adult drew attention across Florida, but under state law, juveniles as young as 14 can be transferred into adult court when facing charges as severe as murder. Prosecutors cited the violent nature of the crime, the use of a firearm, and the impact on multiple victims as reasons for moving forward in adult criminal court. The case was filed under number 23-CF014802A in Circuit Criminal Division E, where it remains active. Court calendars through 2025 list hearings and proceedings, but as of August 2025, no verdict has been reached. The legal process is ongoing, marked by delays that are common in cases involving both juveniles and capital-level offenses. For Tiffany's family, each court date is another reminder of the reality they now live with. A daughter gone, a grandson facing trial as an adult, and a future they never imagined for their family. The sheriff himself described the crime scene as one of the most heartbreaking his deputies had faced, while the state attorney's office underscored the seriousness of trying such a young defendant in adult court. The stakes could not be higher. If convicted on all counts, Adeem Berry may spend the rest of his life in prison. At just 14, he now faces adult charges that could keep him behind bars for life. One of the most pressing questions in this case is how a 14-year-old ended up with a gun in his hands. Investigators have not confirmed where the weapon came from, but Tiffany's mother has been clear. Families must secure firearms to prevent tragedies like this. Her call for accountability reflects a larger debate across Florida about responsibility and access, especially when it comes to children. Tiffany's own words online showed the weight she carried every day. She prayed for her household to be healed, asked for strength to keep going, and declared that no weapon formed against her children would prosper. Those posts revealed both her faith and her exhaustion, the struggle of a single mother working long shifts while trying to protect 3 children and create stability in a fragile home. Then there's the question of mental health and youth violence. Adeem had no prior criminal record, no school suspensions, and was described as quiet by teachers. There were no public warnings that he was headed toward violence, which makes the shock even deeper. Was this the result of an unseen struggle or one irreversible moment of rage? That silence leaves a community searching for answers, and at the center of it all lies the debate between justice and rehabilitation. Florida law allows prosecutors to charge juveniles as adults for murder, and that is the path chosen here. On social media, the community split almost instantly. Some wrote, "He's a baby, he needs help, not prison." Others countered, "He killed his own mother, lock him up forever." Both sides expose a difficult truth. When a child commits an act this violent, is society's duty to punish or to redeem? Tiffany Harris's life cannot be defined only by the way it ended. She was a mother of 3, a grandmother-to-be, and a caregiver who poured herself into others at work and at home. She gave food to children who had nowhere else to go, lifted patients who couldn't stand, and reminded her own kids daily that they were her purpose. Her oldest daughter, Lendra, was preparing to bring Tiffany's first grandchild into the world, a child who will grow up knowing Tiffany only through stories. Her son Devin carries the weight of what he witnessed in silence, and her youngest Adeem now faces trial for the act that shattered the family. For Tiffany's mother, Teresa, the pain of burying her daughter has become a plea for accountability. "Everybody needs to be held responsible for not keeping guns in safe places," she said, urging others to protect their families where she could not save hers. This tragedy forces difficult questions. If it can happen on a quiet street in Riverview, to a woman like Tiffany Harris, then no community is exempt from the dangers of family violence, untreated stress, or a firearm left within reach of a child. It asks us to look closer at our children, to share the burdens single parents carry, and to think seriously about prevention before crisis turns fatal. Tiffany should be remembered for her compassion and strength, not just the violence that ended her life. But her death is also a call to action, to check on loved ones, to secure our homes, and to confront the silent struggles we too often overlook. 3 children lost their mother, a mother buried her daughter, and a 14-year-old faces the rest of his life defined by one afternoon. If you believe stories like Tiffany's deserve to be told, don't just watch, honor her memory. Like this video, share it, and subscribe so these tragedies are not forgotten. And tonight, check on your loved ones, really check.